We are so excited to have you here, Brandi.
Ah,
I have to say, when your publicist reached out and I saw your name, I was like, oh. And then I thought, I've been following her for a while. And I actually told Danae, I was like, I wish I remembered why. Like somebody must have, you know how the social media thing works. Somebody
yep.
posted something, sent me something, and I started following you. And I want to say maybe it was back either when I was pregnant or like new mama
Mm.
journey. And that was when I started following you. But
Oh, wow.
when she sent me your info, I was like, oh my God, yes, I would love to have her on. And you have your new book coming out on thriving, Harness Joy Through Life's Great Labors, for those watching on YouTube. That's what it looks like. And it comes out when? January?
January 9th.
January
Woo!
9th.
So
January 9th.
exciting.
So exciting.
Crazy.
So we usually start by asking our guests to kind of take us through like the journey to how you became who you are, right? Because you call yourself a life doula, which I'm obsessed
Mhm.
with. But I want to know kind of how did Brandi become a life doula? Like, what was that journey like for you?
Okay, so I started off as a birth and postpartum doula.
Okay.
Had done that for years, and then the pandemic happened. And during the pandemic, if you remember, anyone who had a child during the pandemic, doulas, kind of weren't able to go into the hospitals for a bit.
Yeah.
And, that didn't stop babies from being born and people needing support,
Mm-hmm.
but it also didn't stop uh, lifing for people. And so I started getting calls. I remember the first call I got was from a postpartum mom who had just had a baby and their child, they were navigating postpartum NICU stuff, all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't quite sure why they were calling me because, again, we were in the depths of a pandemic. No one was going anywhere. Um, and I wasn't quite sure why, but basically the ask was, can you just talk with her?
Mm-hmm.
Can you just talk with her and sit with her, like virtually sit with her?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, sure. Okay. That's like a different like ask that has never ever happened ever. And so I did. I sat with her and we just kind of navigated how to do this postpartum thing, how to navigate after birth when it doesn't um, end up the way that you envisioned it, um, how to deal with all the things after birth, but then also just as postpartum does and after a baby does, trauma also comes up. Things come to the surface. And so we were navigating that. And yeah, that's kind of how it started,
Mm-hmm.
where I just began holding space for people. And then if it were a situation where it's like, this looks like it needs a little bit more, you need more, then I had plenty of resources, with therapists and all that. And yeah, that's kind of how it started. And the term life doula actually came from a dear, dear, dear sister friend of mine, Aishat Hassati, who I mentioned in the book, who's an amazing healer, amazing mama. We were talking and joking one day. We were like, wouldn't it be cool if like there was someone to like help you like doula through life? Because, life's it'd be life
Mm-hmm.
and there's things, there's transition moments, there's moments of pushing, there's moments of pregnancy that are just so intense. And we all go through this thing of not really knowing what to do. And so I was like, yeah, she's like a life doula. I was like, yeah, like a life doula, right? Like I need a life doula. You need a life doula. And so it just kind of stuck. But yeah. Yeah.
I love that so much. And I love that your sister friend named something that I think we've really lost track of, which is,
Mhm.
I think I'm so introverted. And after having a baby more than any other time in my life, I was like, I need women around me. Like I
Yes.
just felt it like in my body and like such a strong
Yeah.
reaction to like, I need sisterhood. I need someone to like
Yes.
usher me into this next phase of life. But I think you're right. We've kind of lost that
Mhm.
as a normalized thing that we usher one another
Yeah.
through these thresholds of initiation, that we
Yeah.
don't have any sort of blueprint
Yeah.
for what this is supposed to look like, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's no blueprint for life.
Hmm.
Mhm.
It's just not. And we're just out here flailing along
Mhm.
in the deep end, hoping to make it,
Hmm.
Yeah.
to, a little bit of shallow water. And it's, I think we shouldn't do this by ourselves, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So in the book, you kind of take us through like what you call the 4 great labors. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, like how you came up with that concept too, but also
Mm.
just taking us through what those
Yeah.
great labors are?
Yeah. So in my book, I share how, for in my my thought, my experience, um, the 4 great labors are the things that unite us all.
Mm.
So that looks like, I think I start off with thriving in the relationship with yourself, or thriving in relationship. Because, we're all figuring out the relationship with ourselves, and we're also figuring out the relationships with each other, whether it's romantic, platonic, whatever, business. We're always figuring out our relationship with something or someone.
Mm.
And then the second one is mental health. Um, and, we've been through some stuff these past few years. And then you couple that with the stuff that we as humans just are part of our story.
Mhm.
So a lot of us are figuring out our mental health. That was the second great labor. And then the third is grief. You hear it said, death is the great uniter. And it's true, there it doesn't skip any of us. And we all at some point have to grieve. And for that section, we talk about, physical death of, loved ones and people, but then also the death of a thing, a season,
Mhm.
um, what have you, whatever that is, and I really try to normalize the end of things as
Mhm.
also the birth of something else,
Yeah.
Yes.
because that's kind of how it works. And then lastly, thriving while being othered. We
Mm.
all get a seat in that chair for the most part. We can find ourselves being the only woman in the room,
Mhm.
to be the only Black woman in the
Mhm.
room, the only person of color, the only parent, only
Mm.
mother,
Mhm.
only gay person, only, queer, usually we find ourselves where we are the only. And how do we thrive in this space that doesn't feel like it's meant for us?
Mm.
Mm.
And we may not feel welcome, or we feel all the things and we just want to shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink. How do we thrive in those moments when the world, and I call them in my book, passenger thoughts, tell us to become smaller?
Mm.
How do we thrive in those moments? So um, I really just try to think of the spaces where, for the most part, across economic status, race, gender, we all get a space to sit in that in that, whether we like to or not.
Right.
How do we thrive there?
Beautiful. Yeah. I feel like I kind of want to like get into each of them a little bit, but if we start with the relationships, obviously Vanessa and I talk a ton about relationships as, forms of initiation, and that they become like the curriculum for our lives. And right before you came on, we were talking about how you have a 17-year-old son. You have all sons, is that right? 3 sons?
All boys.
All
All
boys.
boys.
All of them.
The
Surrounded by a
only
lot of masculine energy.
there's your other,
Let's talk
right?
about
In the
being
room.
othered in
It's
your
like, how
home.
did that happen? I don't understand.
I'm like, well, that's a conversation in and of itself. But
Yeah.
and so you have a 17-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 5-year-old, right? So,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you're married and have been married for
Yeah.
a long time. Yes.
Yeah. 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 Very long time.
Yeah. So I want to hear more about like what are some of the things that you share in the book about what maybe the long-term relationship that you've been in has taught
Mm.
you about yourself and about like this thing of being
Um,
alive.
so I share in the book how, relationships and partnership can be a great teacher.
Mm-hmm.
It can also be a mirror. For me, it showed me all the things that I had encountered in my childhood, and how it oftentimes will touch the relationships that we have in the present.
Mm.
Yeah, like that. It's relationships. It's interesting because it is a mirror. It's a teacher. It's also too, I really wanted to dismantle the myths around relationships. So,
Mm.
I talk a lot about the things that we thought and think often, like for example, that you will make me whole
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
or you make me happy.
That's right.
And it's a myth. It's
Mm-hmm.
not true. We make ourselves happy. We make ourselves whole. Everyone else is icing.
Mm.
They're icing on the cake. Our kids are icing. Our partners are icing. Our friends are icing. We are the cake.
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, that was one thing. I talked through what it looks like to have self-intimacy, knowing yourself,
Mm.
and really I start off the book with that
Mm-hmm.
because, I believe that that is the greatest relationship you will ever have. It's the greatest love you will ever have is
That's right.
yourself. Like you are your best partner, and it took me a very
Well said.
long time to really understand that. Self-intimacy, we are our greatest love affair and we
Mm.
are our best kind of love. And it took me a really long time to figure that out. I was one of those people that for sure looked, I think, externally for that for a while until, you get tired. You
Mm.
get tired and you realize the person you've been looking for the whole time is right there in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really dive deep at the very beginning into really cultivating that relationship with ourselves first, because everything else is just icing. Everything else is just how we relate to anyone else, whether it's our friends or our family or whatever, is just a mirror of how we interact with ourselves. And so, yeah, that was the first part.
I'd love to I wrote down the self-intimacy part because I thought that was really interesting, and I want to read a little paragraph maybe from your book if I can, because I think that this is a great, I don't know, pathway to more conversation. So you say under the title Dismantle to Discover, if we want to thrive within our relationship with ourself and create a place of inner sanctuary, we must dismantle and disarm everything within our programming that prevents us from coming into a sure sense of self. I love that. I love this idea of dismantling to discover. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we all have these ideas, I think, that we pick up in our lives and they stick with us. They stick to our
Mm-hmm.
bones and they become like our little, our stuffy and we hold them close. And it's really, really, really important for us to really dissect that. Why is it that I feel that this person is going to make me whole? Why do I feel this job it adds to my value? Why is it that I feel that um, my children are what's the word I want to look for? Are a substitute for joy?
Mm.
Mm.
Why is it that I feel that? And, it's hard. It's easier said than done because no one wants to know the answer because the answer
Mhm.
sometimes doesn't feel good. But what I've discovered is the more we dig and we dig and we dig, then we find out things and we discover things. And then we get the chance to like pull it apart and tear down the things that doesn't serve us. That doesn't align with what I really believe
Mm.
anymore. Um, and how I feel about myself anymore. And so dismantle to discover, keep digging till you hit bedrock. And it's easier said than done.
Mm.
What I'm curious to ask about is how you've navigated that in the context of being in a relationship with another person. Because what I find comes up so frequently, especially for women, especially around women in their early 40s, is we go through this period of all of a sudden exactly what you're speaking to, which is like, I've had a very clear idea of like who I should be to be a good wife, woman,
Mhm.
parent, whatever. And all of a sudden, I really don't know if that's my truth or if that's the truth I was fed. And I find that it can feel really difficult to stay in the container of this relationship a lot of times and do that deep excavation that you're talking about. So, will you say a little bit more about like how you navigated doing that inside of a relationship?
Ooh, I mean, it was a lot of talking.
Mm,
And I mean, I was kind of lucky-ish, kind of, sort of, where we were both discovering at the same
mm,
time. My husband at that time was doing some major, major work on himself,
mhm,
and I also was doing some major, major work. So we were kind of lucky, I guess, in the sense of we were both open to how different we are now.
Mhm.
I mean, we met when we were 18 years old,
gosh.
18 and 19. And I mean, I have a kid that's going to be 18 next year.
Mm.
So, I mean, you can tell I have not been 18 in a very long time. um, and, to this idea that no one is going to change
Mm,
or shift or be a completely different person than the person you met is absolutely not true. It's
Mm.
it's 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 egregious. Like, it's not realistic. And thank heavens we're not. I would not want to be 18-year-old Brandy. That would be I'm sorry to anyone who knew me when I was 18. Um so, it was a lot of communication, a lot of talking, um, a lot of bravery and
Mm.
Mm,
transparency. I think that's a big thing that comes up with a lot of relationships is this fear of rejection and this fear that if I say who I am now,
mhm,
what I am now, where I am now, then this person won't love me. And again, it
Mhm.
goes back to that relationship with self. How much do you love you? How
Yes.
much do you want to be the person that you're supposed to be? And then everyone else, again, icing.
Mhm.
So I think we were lucky in the sense of we were both in a space where we were changing and shifting and much needed for
mm,
sure.
Yeah, it's like, the
Mhm.
idea of it's so important that both people approach the relationship with curiosity, approach themselves with curiosity. I was just having this conversation with a client before we got on, and I was just saying to her, I'm like, I hate to be this blunt, but if this partner of yours is not willing in any way to be introspective, is not willing in any way to own what's theirs or to dig into like why they show up this way, right? I mean, I basically said, there's not like this can't go anywhere.
There's
I
no
mean, you'll hit a
there's no
stalemate.
hope.
Yeah, there's no hope for
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean,
and I mean,
it's
don't you
not
say the
no
same
hope.
thing for friends, right? Like it's not just romantic partners. I mean, I think that just in general, like if you're somebody who's like, I'm on this path of growth, if there's somebody in your
Mhm.
life who's like, yeah, no, I'm not interested in looking inward, then there's only so far you can go.
Yeah, there's only so far and there's only so much you can do. And that's
Mhm.
the thing. It's their work to do,
mm,
and I talk about that a lot in the book. Our like I said, we were married really young. So you imagine you have two people whose frontal cortex isn't fully developed.
Mm.
And yet we're getting into contract with each other and marrying
mm,
each other. And we have a child,
Mhm.
frontal cortex still not developed yet. And we're dealing with that. We're dealing with our trauma that we haven't even deemed as trauma yet. We haven't even looked at it as trauma. And then, that brings up so many issues. It brings up infidelity. It brings up all these things that, I call it two children in
mm,
adult bodies
Mhm.
just bump, like, just like figuring
Yeah.
it out. And it took a lot of work. It took him doing his work, me doing my work. And yeah, like you have to have both people who are wanting to figure themselves out. And then that's the other thing too, is not even figuring out the partnership or the relationship or the friendship, but themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
That's right.
why is it that I ... you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's so important because you hear people talk a lot about like, it's not true that you have to love yourself before you can love someone else. And while I think that's fair, also, I think what you're saying is really true because what I see so often is in order to maintain attachments, a lot of people have relationships where there's a whole lot of things we could never talk about because I
Mm-hmm.
need to
Yeah.
not say that because you could leave me and you might not love me.
Yes.
And so that's not actually intimacy. That is like
Yeah.
two people doing life around each other, but we're
They're
not
around.
actually like
Mm-hmm.
safe here with you because I
They're in
know
the
there's a whole lot of
vicinity of
things
each
I can't
other.
say.
Yes.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it's true. It's
but it's
true.
brave work. You're absolutely right. Like, and both people, however many people, if it's friendships, like have to be committed to like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm going to say this, but I'm going to stay with myself
Yes,
regardless of the outcome. And that takes a lot of like, that's the self-love piece
it
to
Mm-hmm.
me.
is. It is. It's a lot of self-love. And I mean, this is something that we talk to our kids about even, we have a teenager who is navigating friendships and
Mm.
we were literally having this conversation last night with him because he was so afraid of his friend who like, they were having like a little like butting of heads and we were explaining to him, say what you feel.
Mm.
He was like, but what if he thinks I don't want to be his friend anymore? And I was like, you can't control that. If you
Mm-hmm.
didn't say that, say your truth, say what you're feeling.
Yeah.
And it was this fear of like, but what if? I'm like, you can't control that.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard, but it's
Mm.
so worth it.
Mm-hmm.
It's so worth it.
Well, and I think we're also doing the work of, it's like, how do I say this? It's like our biology has not evolved at the rate at which I feel like our consciousness has evolved, right? Or even like our technology,
Yeah.
for example. And so a lot
Yeah.
of these conversations that we are all having, your biology is going against it. Like there's this idea of like,
Yeah.
I need to belong. I need to belong. Like I can't be ostracized from the group, right? I mean, this goes back to you would
Yes.
literally die if you weren't in tribe and in community. Right. And so
Right.
sometimes I feel like that, and this is what I talk to with clients all the time, where I say, doing the uncomfortable thing. And I always say, that's so uncomfortable, it makes you feel like you're going to die. And I'm not
Yes.
exaggerating when I say that. There's a reason why you're so uncomfortable. You feel like you're going to die because it's wiring, right? And it's like we're
Yeah.
trying to live at this different level of consciousness because that's where we're moving, and that's what our growth and our evolution as a being, our species, is calling us towards. But don't, like, anybody who's listening, don't think that it's not without real struggle.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Oh yeah, the struggle is real.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
real. It's real.
Yeah, but I love the term self-intimacy, and I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
like I'm gonna quote
Use
you
it.
on that and refer back to it because I think that is the thing that I don't
Mm.
know. The healing modalities haven't talked about enough from my perspective. It's
Mm-hmm.
so like get into the space of co-regulation. You need to like be it, and all of those things are true. And if we do not accumulate the tools to self-regulate and stay with myself and understand the waves of
Mhm.
emotions that come up,
Mhm.
then I will always be dependent on that other person to do those things for me. And I will not believe that I'm capable of it. And then,
That
when we're
part.
trying to attach, we will control. That's just what we do.
That part. And it's like, and what happens then?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the other part of it. Life's and human.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, so
Humans
what
gonna human.
happens? They
Mm-hmm.
they stay humaning. It's
I
like,
love it.
what happens? Like, what happens when that child goes off to college?
Mm.
What happens when that partner who you love makes a mistake
Mhm.
or actually doesn't say it the way he should have said it or she
Mm.
should have said it? They didn't say it the way you wanted them to say it. What
Yep.
happens? What happens when the friend disappoints you? Then what?
Yeah.
So
Mm. Well, I
Love
think
it.
this is a good gateway into another part of the book that Danae and I wanted to have you talk to us about. You kind of alluded to it a little bit, but part of the story that you take us on is the infidelity that happened in the relationship. And
Yeah.
I think Danae and I both, as therapists, especially people who work with couples, um, infidelity is happening. Humans be humaning, as we were just saying.
They love humaning. I
They
don't
love humaning.
understand. I
And
don't
yet
understand it.
we don't talk about it in terms of getting to the other side, right? Like what it looks like in a relationship when you can learn from and integrate the lessons that can come from something like infidelity, and Danae's mentor and somebody I look up to, Esther Perel, talks a lot about infidelity. And also just how, maybe culturally we look at it here versus other countries and things like that. But I'm just curious,
Yeah.
I guess if you could take us through the journey for you all, what was that like for you? And I guess, what is it like now?
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting because like I said, we've been together for a very long time.
Mhm.
We have been together for 22 years.
Babies.
Mhm.
Right. That part.
Mhm.
And, when you're babies, you don't think you're babies. You're
Mm.
like, I am a grown woman.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, you're
Mm.
18.
Yep. You were a literal
That's cute.
toddler.
You just got out of diapers.
Literally.
And literally.
Yep.
And you're in love. Oh.
Mm. Love that for you.
And it's so interesting because now being a parent of a soon to be out the house kid,
That
I
part.
realized how ridiculous I sounded when I was like, I just love him. And he's like telling his person, I just love her. And I would have spent the rest of my life with her. And now I'm like, oh my God, they weren't crazy. They were like, why?
You sure?
Are you sure? Like, you want to maybe give it to like again, frontal cortex is fully developed. You want to just maybe give it till then, and I'm like, nah, I'll be fine. We'll figure it out. And we did, but it was interesting. My husband had, affairs, and that was a thing. That was a thing. And I found out in such a jarring way. And it rocked me. It rocked me in a way where it pulled literally the floor from underneath me. And it was so reminiscent to the countless of other times in the past my floor had been ripped from underneath me. And so it was just devastating. It was devastating in the sense of, but you're my person. You're my safety. You're my person. But that was the first lesson right there is icing. You are your person.
That's right.
You are safe. You create safety for yourself. You create environments where you feel safe, right? As opposed to, you are everything. You are my safety. You are my person. You are,
Right.
And here's the thing. Even if I had that, doesn't mean that I would be less disappointed. No, I would still be disappointed. I would still be just as hurt. But I think it was one of those things where it felt isolating because no one really talks about it. It felt very alone. And it was interesting because, it happened in such a way that was so like, whoa. And it was a friend of mine calls it was a blunt force trauma that I needed to open up my voice. Because there were so many things that when I look back on in the past, and I talk about this in the book, where it's like truth shows up when we're ready for her. It's like we have these things, it's like consciousness that your gut tells you things, and that inner voice says, this doesn't sound right. This doesn't feel right. This doesn't, but we ignore it because we're afraid, that anxious attachment. We're afraid of, well, if I say this, then this might happen. And it's like, no. And, as much as that Saturday was devastating, I'm so grateful for that Saturday because for me, it was, and for my husband, And for our family, it was a catalyst of real healing,
Mm.
and not just healing of ourselves, my wound, child wounds, um, him, child wounds, trauma for myself. But also, I think of the healing of our lineage
Mm.
and those that would come after, because
Mhm.
this wasn't new for his family, you
Yes.
know? And he ended up repeating the very thing that he said he would never repeat, from his father. And so, he started doing his own work, therapy, and getting down to the nitty gritty psychedelic therapy, getting down to the, nitty gritty of why is it that, this is something that you chose.
Mm.
I'm not saying I'm Beyonce, but I am saying that, like, why? Like,
Mm.
why? And, he did that work. And then I started doing my own work where it was more so, um, why does this feel familiar?
Mm.
Why does this betrayal feel familiar? Why does this ripping of the floor feel familiar? Oh, because it is kind of familiar. Why is this lack or loss of safety feel familiar? Because it is familiar. It feels the same as, when you were a kid and you didn't feel protected and you didn't feel safe. And so we went on our own separate journeys. We did not go into save the marriage mode because honestly, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be married to him because I was like, I don't even know who this person is.
Yeah.
I was
Mm.
like, I don't know. I don't know who he is. This is not the person that I know.
Mm.
And, you know, for for him, he wasn't sure either. And so we just kind of went our separate healing paths. And that's kind of was the start of the work that we did.
Mm.
And then it wasn't until later that we were like, okay, let's maybe do some couples therapy, but not
Mm.
from a place of like, we're going to stay together, more so even just co-parenting. Let's just do that
Right.
and see what happens. And that's just kind of how we did. And it was a lot of work. It was not a quick fix or an easy fix. There were moments where I was triggered and moments where I would just voice it. And he had to learn how to show up for me in a different kind of way
Mm.
that he had never before. Um, and now, it's so good. And I use good in the sense of it it was scary at first. Um, but this work that we've done, I know that many people don't do that.
Mm.
And it's because it's so hard. It's hard. And it was never a thing of like, we had such a village around us. I had a dear friend who's a mentor and also, a therapist. And we didn't have people in our ears saying, go marriage. We
Mm.
didn't have that.
Mhm.
We had
Mhm.
people in our ears saying, do what you need, give yourself
Mm.
what you need. You don't have to do this. If this is too hard, don't do it. And we like looking back now, we so appreciate that because the choice was ours.
Mhm.
Um, for me, I knew that I didn't want to make decisions from the place that I was in. And the
Mhm.
place that I was in was just utter hurt and anger and grief and all these feelings. So I knew that being in that space and making a decision either way was probably no permanent decisions. I didn't think that was a good idea. Um, and I didn't. I just took it day by day. Um, and that was probably one of the best decisions that I made. Just taking it day by day and not feeling this pressure to act suddenly and
Mhm.
move. And this pressure too that, well, of like judgment, because that was the other
Yeah.
thing too. I like to say that, I'm pretty like clear, like, and I think one of the fears that I had was people, oh, she just gonna stand by her man, like a stand by your man
Mm.
thing. And I was
Yeah.
like so afraid of that
Mm.
because I was like, no, it's not that at all. I don't want that. But then again, day by day, and just giving myself permission to feel whatever it was that I wanted to feel. If I felt like, okay, I'm in a space to decide that I want to leave, I'm leaving. Or if it's a space that, you know what, I think we need to take it another day. I need to take it another day. That's what I did. I just took it day by day, moment by moment, hour by hour. And then, eventually I got to a space where it's like, okay, I think we're all right. I think he's all right. And yeah, it was a lot of work. Seeing work, that was a big thing for me. Me seeing him do his work was a big thing for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't, yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. I mean, I'm proud of us. I'm proud of the work that we've done. I'm also proud of, I'm proud of myself that I didn't feel pressure either
Yeah.
way. And I didn't succumb to pressure either way. So yeah, a lot of gentleness.
Yeah. I just want to thank you for talking about it and writing about it for a couple of reasons. I think there's something that is so important about, well, so many things that you said. I just felt so struck by. But the way that, from my perspective, and this is, I'm going to circle back to why I'm saying it, but there's a way that we societally are still holding a little bit of, I'm just going to say like a childishness when it comes to this person that is going to be like this omnipresent force in my life when we come together, and they're not going to human, and they're going to like choose me and love me forevermore. And if they step outside of that box, I'm done with you.
I'm
right.
done.
And it's just not real. And I think what you said that like I had a really strong reaction to, Brandi, was you were talking about like some of the generational pain. And I think especially for Black men, I'm going to say this actually,
Yes.
like what it
Yes,
does
yes,
to
yes.
grow up in a society that views you a certain way, and
Yes.
what that does to the psyche, and the ways that we are not really conditioned to have like hold with compassion and see the humanity in the men that we're with. And I know, like, let me
Yes.
be the first to raise my hand on
Yes.
that, because I have been there. And
Yeah.
I just felt a lot of like, not only for my husband, but like for my father, and some of what that
Yes.
was that he was
Yeah.
struggling with in this society, attempting to navigate trauma and be a good man for his family, and not having a lot of tools, So
Yes.
thank you. I deeply
Exactly.
appreciate you speaking to that.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I mean, John, who I'm sure at some point will write a book of his own, but like he didn't even know certain things that he had experienced were trauma. Didn't even know until he got into certain work that he was like, oh my God. And I saw him just open up and weep and just cry.
Yeah.
Like when it really struck him, like just cry. And just so you know, my husband's a Virgo. He is not a crier. He's not.
Married to one of those, Brandi.
Danae's ex-husband was also
I was
a
married
Virgo.
to one of those, Brandi. God bless you. Y'all are still together. I love you for that.
They are a trip, right? Like,
they are a specific breed. That's very good.
It's a very specific brain. It's like,
that's so real.
Oh my God. Like, I mean, we work out great because I let him Virgo. I'm like,
what are you? I'm like, but wait, what are you with that Virgo?
I'm a Leo, which usually wouldn't work. But I think because we've now realized, like, okay, if I let him Virgo and buy all the Post-it notes that he wants and all the calendars and all the things and highlighters, he makes my life better, actually, and more organized. Like, he's the one who set all of this, like, mic stuff up.
Yeah, that's real.
He's
very organized.
He's very strategic. And I mean, and even like past, like very strategic. And so, for him, like letting him Virgo peak. And then for me, he's like, let her Leo, because it's going to make us so much better. We're going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be fabulous. And so, yeah, no, like seeing him though, just crack open when it really hit him that what he'd experienced was just not a typical day, but trauma,
Yes.
like trauma, and how no one talked to him about it. He just had to just move on.
Suck it up.
It's like, what do you do? Right. What do you do with those feelings? What do you do with those emotions? You know, and it's like, yeah, I'm not saying that it's an excuse for certain behaviors, but I am saying that it helps us to understand
That's right.
and hold humanity and have empathy and be like, oh, I understand you a little bit better now, you know? So
Absolutely.
yeah, I feel you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I felt like you were about to say something, Vanessa. I didn't want to jump on.
Nope.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but in terms of thriving, I do want to talk about the other piece because I feel like that's not something that comes up a lot, and what
Yeah.
that does to our sense of self and how we feel about ourselves as we move through the world. And I think you did such a beautiful job of speaking to in the beginning all of the other ways that, or excuse me, all of the ways that that can show up.
Mhm.
But will you say more about like thriving in these spaces of feeling other?
Yeah. I mean, I knew that when I wrote this book, I wanted to include that because it's such a huge part of my story. I grew up in the South in the 80s, and I was, rolled really deep with my cousins. Like we were a whole gang, right? And, you know, they were all like lighter skin. I was dark, a lot like my father. And, I remember like certain instances. I remember things that were so clear that I looked different than them, And then if, I talk about this in the book, but, if you looked on TV back then, all the love interests were all lighter skinned Black women. Even if you look at Coming to America, which is by far one of my favorite films.
Good.
It's so good. I could quote it from beginning to end. But Lisa McDowell was the love interest.
Yeah.
And her sister, who was my complexion, was like this like, she's like, she'll, she just takes whoever she can get. And I remember registering that even as a kid, like, interesting. And so it started there, just like feeling like other. And then I went to, in Connecticut, I was like the only Black kid in my school, like other than this other Black girl. And I remember feeling othered. It's like, oh, I look different than them. And then when we moved to the South and I had my gang of cousins, oh, I look different still. Oh my gosh. Can we do anything about this? And it just, it really set me on a path of, I really want to talk about that because it affects us in a way that, we feel like we don't belong. And as humans, we want to belong. To your point, we want to belong to somewhere, something. And how do we thrive in that? Do we, oftentimes we survive it and we shrink and we make ourselves smaller and we make ourselves, less threatening, or we make ourselves, all the things so we can be palatable as opposed to showing up as is. I talk about how I did this, I was part of this meditation with Koya Webb, and she asked the question. It was so like simple, but also like, oh my God. She said, how do you want to show up? And I had never heard that question asked. And it was a sea of us Black women. We were doing it virtually because it was during the pandemic. But she said, how do you want to show up in the world? And for me, it really hit me. It struck me in such a way that was like, no one's ever asked me that. No one's ever asked me, how do I want to show up? How do I need to show up? I can answer you that. How are people expecting me to show up? I know that answer as soon as I enter a room. It's like the spidey sense that many of us who are other feel. But how do I want to show up? That was something that really stuck with me. And it was one of the things that was the kind of like the catalyst of moving forward, asking myself, that's how I thrive in this skin of mine, in this womanhood of mine, in this motherhood of mine, all the hats that I wear.
Mm.
How do I want to show up in a space? Because I get a say.
Mm-hmm.
I get a say. You know,
Beautiful.
I get to choose how I want to show up. And my people in that space are my people.
Mm-hmm.
And whoever's not feeling that, maybe they're not my people. They may not be my people. That's cool. Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It happens.
Yeah.
And so that for me was that was something that I really, really wanted to write about, because I know that there are so many people that feel that burden, feel that need to go through like a sense of acrobatics and contortionist,
Mm-hmm.
like transforming just to be accepted and to belong. And so I really wanted to get across in that section of the book that part of thriving is to unbend ourselves and start to, you know, be okay with all of this,
Mm-hmm.
all of it. So
I just felt so struck by is that we will find a way to other ourselves and one another. And the reason I felt struck by this was that I grew up as the only Black kid in a predominantly white environment. And I had never experienced what you're talking about in terms of skin color until I moved to New York. And all of a sudden, everyone was talking about like the different shade. Now, if you're the only Black girl, it's like, you're just the Black girl. Nobody cares about the shade of Black you are. Right. But all of a sudden it was like, there was like ranking based on like whatever. Right. But like, it's fascinating. It circles back to what you're saying about like this self-intimacy work is always, I believe, what we came here for, right? Like I was leading a class this morning where it was like the Stoic philosophers were talking about what you're talking about, right? Like how do we like find a self of belonging within ourselves so that we can show up in the world in all these ways? Like this has been the human experience forever, ever, right?
Forever. Yeah.
And there's all these ways that we like identify, but it's like, but the work is like, sorry, you guys, I just felt so struck by, I'm like, we've always done this. We find
We've
a
always
way.
done this. Always. We've always wanted to belong. It's like, I'm sure if we were to look in caves, we'd see drawings of like a group of like stick figures here, and then like one stick figure over here, like,
just them by themselves. Yep.
Totally. Like, I want to come in, please. Thanks. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, self-intimacy. I love it so much. Brandi, I feel like we could keep going, but we want to be mindful of time. So we're going to get into our lightning round of questions.
Cool.
The first question that we always ask is, who have been your greatest teachers, mentors, people who have impacted your journey up to this point, whether you've known them or just appreciate their work?
Okay. So people that have impacted my journey, Toni Morrison. I've never met her, but that would have been amazing. My grandmother, I talk about her a bit in the book, where she showed me what home feels like and what safety feels like. And even when I see her now, I always immediately feel safe with her, immediately. I would say, who else? A dear friend and mentor, Angela Williams. I acknowledge her in the acknowledgements. She has been there for me in grief. And anytime I've ever needed her, you know, she's that person that is the life doula for me. And she's just everything. She's everything. Greatest teacher. Also, too, I mean, my children, you know, they teach me so much. They teach me how to have fun. They teach me that I'm doing a really good job, because they're so much cooler than their father and I. They're so cool. Like, they're so cool, and they're so sweet. And they're just great humans. They're great. They're so great. Even Jupiter, who is a walking tornado, he's so great. And he's so funny. Like, they make me laugh. They make me laugh. I forgot what he said this morning. He said, Mommy, I heard someone say a bad word. I said, what is it? What did they say? Holy fish crap.
Aw.
And I was like, what? And it was so funny to me. I was just like, holy fish crap. I was like, I'm going to start saying that. That is a really intense word. Holy fish crap.
Intent. I love it.
I don't know what that even means. Holy fish crap. But yeah, my children, my partner, and yeah, they've all kept me on the path, I think.
Mhm.
You know, made me better. I thought of Toni Morrison quite a lot when I was writing this book, you know, because she was a mother and she had kids and she was writing and editing and doing all these things. And, you know, it reminded me a little bit of how I sometimes feel like I'm pulled in a lot of different directions. And somehow she just kind of did it. But
Mhm.
I felt like she was like guiding me the whole time. Like you know, she was a early morning writer, and I am too. And yeah.
Beautiful.
So this idea of, flow, like this moment where you can be so aligned, get lost in something that the entire day could just go by. What is flow for you? Like, what are you doing when you find those moments?
Mm. I'm slowing down
Mm.
because I am a bit like like I just go. Like I can go. Like that is it's my survival
Mhm.
thing and also my thriving thing. Like I just go with it. But
Mhm.
also like it's definitely rooted in survival and trauma. And so whenever I find myself just like going and just like, you know, I tell myself, slow down.
Mhm.
I literally say it out loud, slow down. I said it this morning, actually, now that I think about it. I said, slow down.
Mhm.
And I did. I must have channeled this like mama voice because I said it loud to myself, like, sit down, slow down, slow your ass down. And I did. And it just, that's what flow feels like to me when I slow down, that I don't have to rush, that I can only do one thing at once, one
Mhm.
thing at a time. Like, just, that's all I can do. I'm
Yeah.
not a cyborg. I'm human. One thing at a time. Just one thing at a time. Yeah.
Yeah. And Brandi, what breaks your heart?
So much breaks my heart that sometimes I think that's why I kind of have to find the joy, because my little heart can just like, oh,
Mhm.
my tender little heart. When I see my kids get out of the car to school, it breaks my heart because they're so little and I know they won't be that way forever. And like even this morning when I saw Jupiter get out of the car in with his backpack on, and he's such a little peanut. He's such a little peanut. Just like
The
walking
backpacks
and
are
chasing
bigger than
after the
them.
little. They're so much bigger. It just like broke my heart, like open, like, oh, like here it goes. Here it goes. Like we are almost there. Like before I know it, he's going to be out of the house. And I know it's a while from now, but it breaks my heart that here we go. Here we are. Like they grow up. That breaks my heart because yeah. And I know that's bad. I know I want them to grow up, but it breaks my heart that it goes so fast.
Yeah.
It goes so fast.
I need you to stop, Brandi.
I'm sorry. And I can't control it. I can't control it. I can't like pause it. I can't say pause. Okay, this moment's sweet. All right, go back. Like and start the remote. I can't do that. Like I have to like be present with them because it's gonna go. it's going to go and it's going to like start and they're going to be peace out at some point. So that breaks my heart. It really, really does. And it doesn't help when they're so small and cute. It doesn't help.
Can I tell you, if I let myself sit and think about what you're saying, I would just like weep right now. Like, I can feel it.
It's
so
heartbreaking.
real. It
It's
really
heartbreaking.
is. It's so hard.
And I wanted to pick something else, but that's what breaks my heart. It does. Like, I mean, there's a lot of things out there I could name, but that one, because I see it every day.
Yeah.
Like, it's right in front of me every day. Like, it's like every day just breaking my heart, like mid condition. Breaking my heart.
Yeah.
Well, we'll bring it back for this one and ask you, what is your favorite food?
Oh, I have a lot of favorite foods. I love food so much.
Me too.
I love food so much. It's so good. Okay. Few things, but I'll say this one, and I only say it because I miss it. Baked macaroni and cheese. And I mean like the baked kind. The baked. Not
And she's
this,
from the
like,
South. So
that's what I'm yes.
Listen.
Do you know that you're the only other person on the show, I think, that's mine, and no one has ever said that. And I'm like waiting for somebody to say it.
They don't know what they're missing.
They don't know what
That's
they're
what it
missing.
is. Baked macaroni and cheese, not the stovetop.
Mm-hmm.
The
No, it's a different
baked.
thing.
Like, where you have to
Bubbly,
use a
breadcrumbs
Yes.
on top.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to use a spatula to
Yep.
get it out. And it's a block of baked macaroni and cheese. That's what I miss. And I miss it because I'm vegan, I'm plant-based, and I have yet to find one that equals that. And I don't think I ever will. I don't think I ever will. It is what it is. I'm not going to find it. I don't even try to make it. And I usually can make most things vegan. Like I can make meatloaf. I can make lasagna. I can make anything vegan. And it'd be like, okay,
It's really good. Yeah.
that thing is thinging. It's doing its thing. But I have not figured out baked macaroni and cheese. And so I grieve.
Yeah.
I
feel
grieve for baked macaroni and cheese. I grieve it. Like every holiday, I grieve it. Every Sunday, I grieve it. Because I know I'll never, because there's certain things you have to use. Like my mom used to do the like block of Velveeta, and then you like melt it down, and then you put it in the noodles.
Stick
and
of
you add
butter.
eggs. Oh, a lot of butter. You add it in there, and then you bake it, and you add the sprinkled cheese too, and it's just this amazingness. And I'm not gonna ever. I don't think I'll ever have it the way that was, and so I just have to grieve and just
imagine. I just made macaroni and cheese for my kids' feast like today at their little daycare because that was what she asked, to make vegan mac, because there are some kids, like my kid doesn't eat meat and stuff. And so I made it, and my brother, who's staying with me right now, bless his heart, 29-year-old, he comes in, he goes, that's that mac and cheese that you make. He goes, I had that there. That tastes like garbage. And I was like, it's vegan. Shut up. And I just had to die because it's true. Like that is the one food that I feel like even when it's done really well, it's still not
good.
The same. Yeah.
It's not the same. It's good. Like it's edible. It's delicious even, but it's
just not the same.
It ain't what that was. It's not. And so I don't even try it anymore. Like I just like, even for this upcoming holiday, I'm like, okay, I'm going to make my, cornbread, dressing, which I can make vegan, and that thing does well. I can make my collard greens. I can make my sweet potatoes. I can make my pumpkin pie. I can make, all the things, my cranberry sauce, all the stuff. I even get the vegan turkey. We're good. But that I can't replicate. And so I don't even try it. I just grieve and I'm just sad.
I'd be very curious if you had it in front of you, if it would taste the same and you enjoy it. Because your taste buds change when you've been vegan for a while. Your stomach, like it curdles. You're like, oh, this is making me sick a little bit. So I'm just going to put that in so you don't have to grieve as hard.
My mouth would probably be happy. My stomach would not. My stomach would be like.
Well, we're not talking about our stomachs right now. We're talking about our mouths.
Trying to make it easy. See, I just love a reframe. I'm just
right. My stomach would be like, girl,
what have
come
you
on. What are we doing?
What are you thinking? Right.
What are you thinking? But my mouth would be happy for like 0.2 seconds. It'd be like,
yes.
It's also the
So good.
nostalgia of it, you know, like there's just certain foods when I was a
Yes.
kid where I'm like, oh, I dream about it. Like Count Chocula was
Yes.
always my favorite. And I had it the
Yes.
other day during Halloween and I was like, this actually tastes really gross and like chemicals. But in my mind, it's like the most amazing thing ever, you know?
No, it's true. It's kind of like when I tried like this like strawberries and cream Quaker oats years
Oh,
ago.
Oh, yeah.
I was like,
I
I was
remember
in college.
those.
I was in college actually. No, I was in my early 20s. And I remember like trying it after a while of not having it and being like, so this is a lot of sugar
Yeah,
with
it's
sugar
it.
and then a little bit of oats. That's what this is. Got it. Cool,
Yep.
cool, cool. Yeah.
yep.
So
Oh,
yeah, I'm just gonna
Wow.
grieve. It's fine.
we'll stay in our
It's
memories.
fine. I
I'm gonna
know.
show the book again because I think it's really pretty. I feel like everyone
Oh,
should see your
yay.
beautiful cover.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
but just such a gift to have you on, Brandi. Congratulations on this
Thank
book.
you.
And I feel like, you know, the things that you speak to are such important touch points. And so thank you for writing it. Thank you for, you know, diving into your gifts in that way. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited for everyone to read it. I think it's gonna, hopefully, it'll help some people, support some
Mm.
folks.
We'll put a link to it in the show notes for everybody that's listening right now. So it's called On Thriving and it comes out in January.
Yay. Thank you.
So fun.
Like,
Yay.
I was like, recording.